If your people live in the lands on the border of two often warring empires, you're in for a bad time. This was the case for the Polish, caught between Germany and the USSR, for the Koreans, caught between China and Japan, and also for the Kurdish, who sat on the border between the Ottomans and the Persians. However, unlike the first two examples, the Kurdish people never managed to create their own internationally recognized nation, which raises the obvious question: why? Why isn't there a Kurdistan? So, as of the late 19th century, the Kurdish people have lived overwhelmingly in either the Ottoman Empire or Persia. Thus, the only way that the Kurds could have created their own state was by the breakup of these two. And despite their best efforts, neither of the two empires were able to break the other. So what happened in order to cause this change? Well, it was Europeans, specifically France, Britain, and Russia, the latter two of which certainly had big plans for the region. When the Ottoman Empire and Persia ran into problems, both states began to decline. This saw them lose territory, fall into debt, and as a result, both sought to modernize. And in came European advisors who brought with them the concept of the nation-state, which, to grossly oversimplify, is the idea that a state, the place over which a government exercises power, should be the same where its people, those who speak the same language and are a part of the same cultural group, live. If your people lived outside of your borders, time to go conquering. And if you had other peoples who lived within your borders already, well, it was time to change them and make them your own. This latter bit of advice was applied to the Ottomans, who stripped local Kurdish rulers of their autonomy and applied a one-size-fits-all approach. Tensions rose between Kurds and the government, but before much could happen, it was time for World War I. As you'll know, the Ottomans lost, and when the Entente was chopping up the Ottoman Empire, there were plans for an independent Kurdish state. The primary Western advocate for a Kurdistan was US President Woodrow Wilson, who cared enough to push for a Kurdish state, but not enough to actually do much about it, since he delegated it to the British. The plan was that the Kurdish would get these lands with some British oversight. However, the Turkish, within their brand new nation of Turkey, had decided that the terms of the Ottoman defeat were too harsh, and so fought a war to retain their territorial integrity. The Entente were pretty sick of war at this point, and so the British and Turkish came to an agreement about the Kurdish. Forget about those guys, and we'll make a border here, which the Turkish agreed to in return for some of that delicious oil money, and so the modern-day borders of Turkey, Iran, and Iraq were finalized. The Kurdish people were now mostly split between the three states, and in the following decades there was zero chance for that to change. The region's leaders supported the people who had carved up the area in the first place, and that stability of these allies was far more important to them than the ideal of self-determination. And it wasn't until just after World War II that the only modern Kurdish state was created. This came about after Iran had been invaded by Soviet and British forces, and in 1946, after international pressure, Soviet forces withdrew from the north of the country. This created a power vacuum, and from this sprang the Republic of Mahabad. Now, unfortunately for them, this was the Cold War, and given that the Soviets had offered the Kurds their support, the West would not. And so, less than a year after its founding, it was swiftly conquered and reincorporated into Iran. And until the 1970s, calls for a Kurdish state were basically non-existent, and no such nation was ever